So let me kind of share with you what's going on around the globe and what are the challenges that are on the minds of the CEO. Well, this is a total global view. About 800 CEOs worldwide, stratified into 4 big geographic areas around the world. But human capital sits here at number 1. For those that were here last year, we had a lot of innovation going on, and the article that I provide to you was around innovation, and yet a lot of regulation was kind of getting in people's way. So this year, because of economic slow growth, human capital globally makes the number 1 spot, because what I'm seeing globally is everybody's kind of looking within their organization, develop training, leadership development, career pathing, retain those employees, because that's where they're going to get the best margins to at least deal with the near-term slow economic growth. That was profound globally, not necessarily in the U.S. We'll see that shortly. But operational excellence sits at number 2. And that has evolved over time in terms of terminology, but innovation's still up there. It's not surprising that they don't make much movement over the years, but it's up to us as leaders. We can't do everything, so we have to determine what are our biggest challenges and work on those strategies that are most appropriate for us, but to have at least common knowledge of how other people are approaching it. So you see customer relationships really is jumped up from previous years. That's a subset to operational excellence, but people are thinking we need to hold on to our customers, we need to better understand our customers, because the cost of acquiring is certainly greater than retaining. Global political risk has been sitting there in the middle. In terms of a ratio perspective, think of the number 1 and 2 is about 2 times the importance or weighting than kind of 6 and down. So the top 5 is where the globe is kind of looking at the priorities. Now there's been kind of some term changes. So human capital, in I think the article that I provided you from 2011 about accelerating growth, I chose that one because it most mirrors this year. I didn't write an article this year because 2011 pretty much marries what's going on here. But there was terminology around talent management that kind of just has moved to human capital. It's about the retention, the training, the recruitment, the onboarding, the leadership development. And operational excellence, this term is just always interesting to me, because it starts with cost reduction. Of course, in the financial downturn, it came up as cost reduction. Not surprising, because people are looking for liquidity and cash and trying to figure how to manage through the financial crisis. Then last year it turns to cost optimization, which is really the more appropriate term, because you're balancing value and cost. It's just not cutting cost at the expense of value. It's now operational excellence, which really is a much bigger term. So here's the Florida view. This is what you shared to Pat in terms of the ranking. It's operational excellence, sustainability, customer relationships, innovation, and human capital being your top 5. So these are the top 5 we're going to have some discussions around today. Now, sustainability, as Pat sent me the results, it dawned on me that the discussion that we had last year around sustainability was really about how do we maintain the gains. Very much what we heard from Dawn and award winners like Lillian here, of how do you get there. You might win the Baldrige, you might win Sterling, but how do you maintain that? Things happen. Executives churn, the organization churns, you now have new millennials in there. How do you maintain those gains? So sustainability here is really maintaining the gains, where the question really from the conference board survey was looking even more broadly, looking at the triple bottom line, looking at social responsibility, looking at green business. So I've separated those two. How many are thinking, when we break out on sustainability, that your interest is in maintaining the gains? Okay. And on the flip side, those that are looking for strategies around green business, renewables. Anybody? Okay, so we're going to go with the maintain the gains. That was anticipated, but I didn't want to lose sight to that. So operational excellence, when we're breaking out, we're talking about moving that organization, the transformation, the alignment, the strategy. That's the movement. And then on the sustainability piece, we're going to say how do we maintain the gains? How do we keep that plate spinning and still continuously improve. And that will give us a much greater focus and much deeper discussion about strategy and practice. Quality, the word quality through all those decades has just morphed into so many things. And in fact, the vernacular changed from quality to performance excellence in kind of like the mid-90s to better communicate. You talk about, Karen, about communication. The term quality has so many terms. So sometimes it thinks, well, it's inspections, it's ISO, it's QC circles, it's Kaizen events, it's Six Sigma, it's quality audits. Well, okay, but what I'm encouraging, at least I'm encouraging that we don't restrain or restrict our thoughts, that when we hear quality, that we're making that connection down to, you know, a QC circle or a team. Teams are super important, hugely important, but if we do it strategically. So I submit to you to think of those as essential. These are skill sets and competencies that are essential, but not sufficient in really transforming your business to be a high performance, or as I really highlight, operational excellence. I just see it as another synonym for big quality. If we want to talk operational excellence, then let's use terms that you're comfortable with, that can communicate properly to your organization. But I suggest that when we think about quality, think about the big picture, the model, the leadership, the strategic planning. Operational excellence will enable to reduce those opportunities or misses that could affect your brand and therefore off your revenue stream. 30 years of experiences, I shared those terms. With that comes good and bad experiences, and it influences all of us as leaders. If you've transitioned through different companies or organizations, how you experience the deployment of quality, the experiences of teamworks or policy deployment or Six Sigma, it was either favorable and you see the value, or it was an unfavorable experience. The methodologies are terrific. The experience is typically not the methodology. It's the deployment and the approach of how it's done. If it's if you come from an organization, say a Six Sigma type organization, and your experience was a company of what was good was number of projects and number of certifications was the key performance measure, exclusive of being aligned to the business, you might have had a bad experience. If, I need to get certified, will you sign off? I need to get this implemented, sign off so that I can show that I got somebody in the organization to use my solution. That could create a bad experience. I've had some in organizations, and in fact, I have the registered trademark for Sigma Schmigma. People really don't care that I'm a Grand Poobah Master Black Belt, to be honest. When I go out in the field, I just prefer to say, one of my last experiences, I went a bunch of union guys, and they had Googled me and came in, and they didn't know what they were in for. So I show up, and so what does the vice president of quality do? Are we going to do Six Sigma? And I just sat next to him. I said, Sigma Schmigma. I says, let's fix the darn pump. And over time, we fixed problems. But underneath that, how did we fix it? With systematic improvement. In fact, we used Six Sigma methodology. But you had mentioned in terms of term not using Baldrige as a term. We didn't use the B word. We didn't use the SS. We solved business problems to add value to the business. And then over time, then they get excited that they know Six Sigma. But it was the good and bad experiences that influence us. Technology, huge. What a godsend in terms of the ability to transform data into information to make a decision. Maybe sometimes overwhelming amounts of information and data by which to inform. But the challenges still exist. I mean, just because a bar chart is in 3D color doesn't mean that it's any good. I mean, you go in with confidence with the chart. Well, are we asking the question, what was the source of the data? How good is the data? There's one or two of us that extended the y-axis to make that gap look a little bit better, as we're showing our revenue growth, right? Still fact-based decisions, and these tools are enablers to make those fact-based decisions. 4 generations is very unique now, from boomers down to millennials coming in. How do we engage the workforce with very different learning styles, engagement styles, and get them aligned collectively so we're not in that video that Don shared with the herd, that we're aligning to the business. As a result, knowledge transfer is huge. With the attriting and retiring boomers, how does that knowledge get transferred? And we talk about it all the time. Oh, we've got to have intellectual memory, knowledge management. But if that's an issue that we're going to talk today on, really get into the guts of it. How do you really make it happen? Because we can talk the words, but we've got to get tactics to do that.
Let's see, constantly getting customer feedback, and more importantly, acting on that feedback. There was conversations internal or in our group that discuss, well, we get a lot of information, but we're not really acting on it as much as we can. And we talked about how that can actually be more detrimental to your organization. If you get a lot of ideas and never act on them, then people see that you don't have that commitment. And then the last area within operational excellence is leadership's commitment. You've got to have leadership that walks their talk. And without that, it's not going to work. On the right side of the page, a couple of areas, again, similar to what's already been discussed. Strategic planning and process mapping is critical. Also, benchmarking not only internally, but externally. How do you compare to your peers? And then within the different services that you may deliver, looking outside of your peers in your particular industry to make sure that, as an example, your customer service department, if you have one, how does that compare to the very best customer service groups in the nation or in the world, not just within your industry? And then finally, need to have, in order to obtain operational excellence, strong employee engagement and a strong change management system. So that's what our group identified. Did I miss anything, team? Nope. All right. Thank y'all.
Great job. We're coming back this way.
While she's walking back, I'd like to reinforce a couple points that were just made here. The interconnectivity. Operational excellence was the team, but we heard leadership, customer focus, information, really reinforcing the business model, the quality and or operational excellence, but the business model, it requires all that around process management. And we talked about benchmarking, better in class, who's better than us or who's best in class, getting out of sector. The only way that you can get out of sector is to have process in place, to really know how you do it. Because if you just go to somebody else, say in hospitality and you go to Ritz-Carlton, well, they got the best in practice. Just because they take the practice doesn't mean that you can just embed it into how you're doing unless you know how you're doing. So therefore, reinforcing process management as a fundamental practice, not only in sustainability that we heard here, but also just in operational excellence. So they all interconnect. It's a great point that you made out.
Okay, we had customer relationships, and you're right, the interconnectivity is amazing as you see all of it flow through.
Some takeaways, just to recap takeaways. In your package, I had a couple articles in here. One from my conference board report about accelerating growth, as well as a one-page flyer on teams, the value of teams, cross-functional, key dependencies. It ties in with some key areas, what I heard around strategic planning, business planning, execution. So a flyer in there. Sterling.com, John's going to give you some rich understanding of what's available through there. If you're interested in more detail on the actual CEO report, CEOchallenge.org is there. It's a fee if you're not a member, but it gives much more richness in terms of sector, geography, if that's of interest to you. And it's all has publications, previous publications about how I've answered CEO challenges, and they're also serving on publications on my website. Feel free to tweet me at MikeAdams1000. I'd be happy to respond collectively or individually to any questions that you might have. So I thank you very much.
Please join me in thanking Mike Adams.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Well, please do tweet.